It all started on a quiet Saturday morning out by the lake. I was sipping coffee on my porch, enjoying the breeze and the sound of birds, when the HOA president's teenage son strolled over, phone in hand, acting like he owned the place. Didn't even say hello before demanding my Wi-Fi password. Not asking, demanding. I laughed at first, thinking it was some sort of joke. But when I told him no, he got real serious. Said his mom told him it was community internet since I live on shared HOA property. Mind you, I pay for every bit of that service myself. And there's not a single word in the HOA agreement about internet access. 10 minutes later, I see him across the street, pacing on his phone, and then, out of nowhere, 2 squad cars pull into my driveway. The kid actually called 911, said I was tampering with neighborhood access and refusing shared resources. I couldn't believe it. The officer who came to the door looked half embarrassed, just having to ask me about it, but that was the final straw. I'd had enough of the entitlement, the nonsense, and the constant pushing of boundaries. If they wanted to play games, I was going to show them what real boundaries looked like. So, I made a few calls, flipped a few switches, and by nightfall, their entire street was offline. And that's where things got really interesting. The thing is, I didn't just randomly cut off their internet. The whole neighborhood system runs through a shared utility line that happens to cross my land that's been in my family for generations, long before the HOA ever existed. Years ago, when they wanted to run those lines, they needed my signature. I agreed under one condition: any maintenance or changes had to go through me. Well, they broke that deal last year when they secretly upgraded without telling me. So, legally, I had every right to shut off the switch on my end, and that's exactly what I did. Word spread fast. Phones stopped working, security cameras went dark, and Karen, yes, the president herself, stormed down my driveway like she owned the world. She was furious, screaming that I'd put the entire block at risk. I calmly handed her a copy of the old agreement she'd forgotten about and reminded her she'd trespassed the moment those utility workers crossed my fence line last year without notice. Her face turned red, but she wasn't backing down. Then came the kicker. She hinted they were planning to sue me. Said the community had voted to make my connection public, as if that even held legal weight. What she didn't know was, I had already talked to a lawyer months ago, after noticing strange network activity. So while she scrambled to gather support, I was already preparing to expose something far bigger, something they'd never expect. After Karen's heated outburst, things didn't cool down, they escalated. Her teenage son, the same one who started all this by asking for my Wi-Fi password, like it was his, right, decided to take matters into his own hands. He called 911, claiming I was tampering with community utilities and endangering lives. Within minutes, a deputy showed up at my gate, lights flashing, and Karen standing smugly behind him like she'd already won. The officer was respectful, but clearly confused. I explained the land agreement, showed the paperwork, and even pulled up an email trail from when they bypassed my consent. The deputy listened, nodded, and said, "Well, this seems like a civil matter." That wiped the grin right off Karen's face. But the drama didn't stop there. Several neighbors began whispering about unreliable service and connection interruptions even before I flipped the switch. One guy even confessed his home security system had been hacked a few weeks back. That's when it hit me this wasn't just about internet access. Something fishy was going on, and Karen's obsession with controlling every inch of the lakefront wasn't just about power. It might be hiding something. Meanwhile, I noticed someone lurking near my tool shed at night, and strange signals kept pinging off my private server. It wasn't just a petty argument anymore. It felt like they were watching me, or worse, using my land for something far more serious. And I wasn't about to let that go unnoticed. A few nights after the deputy's visit, I noticed my motion sensor lights flicker once, then shut off completely. I walked out with a flashlight and my dog right behind me. In the distance, near the tree line by the lake, I spotted two silhouettes moving low and fast, like they'd done it before. I didn't chase, just watched them disappear toward the HOA's private dock. The next morning, I checked the security footage from my side of the lake. Nothing. My system had gone offline during those exact hours. Someone had tapped in again, and I was done playing nice. I went into town and spoke with a buddy who worked IT for the county. He took a look at my setup and found a hidden device buried in my signals, something used to leach data, even manipulate devices remotely. Karen's crew hadn't just mooched off my Wi-Fi, they'd infiltrated it. Meanwhile, the neighborhood group chat, which I'd been booted from weeks ago, was blowing up. One of the other residents forwarded me screenshots. Karen was pushing a motion to restrict all private land developments near the lake, citing security concerns. It wasn't just about Wi-Fi or control. She was trying to shut me down completely. That same evening, as I stared across the water at the glowing lights from the HOA clubhouse, a low hum kicked on. Their side of the street lampposts, routers, even security gates was powered by one main junction box. And it just so happened, it sat on my land. I didn't flip the switch yet, but I did call a quiet meeting with a few of the other homeowners who had grown tired of the HOA's control. One by one, they admitted to facing similar nonsense: surveillance, unreasonable fines, and in one case, a neighbor's satellite dish being forcibly removed for aesthetic reasons. We weren't just dealing with Karen anymore. This was a whole network of self-appointed enforcers, playing power games around the lake, just when we started discussing filing an official complaint with the county. I received a letter. Not an email, a certified envelope, hand-delivered to my gate. Inside was a cease and desist, accusing me of unauthorized use of HOA infrastructure and threatening legal action for tampering with public utilities. The kicker: they claimed the junction box on my land was part of their property. At this point, I wasn't even mad. I was impressed. They were so sure of their authority, they'd crossed into pure fiction. But then came the real twist. My friend from the county office called late that night. He'd checked into the HOA's utility setup and discovered something strange. The HOA had never filed official permits to run power through my section of land. In fact, they had bypassed county regulations altogether. That meant one thing: if I shut off the power, they had no legal grounds to stop me. But more than that, they could be in real trouble with the county. And Karen, she had no clue what was coming. At dawn the next morning, I stood beside the old utility shed at the edge of my ranch, fingers hovering over the main breaker. I gave the county office one last call to confirm everything. My buddy on the line just chuckled. "You're within your rights. That box feeds power to them, not the other way around. Flip it." And so I did. Within minutes, the neighborhood across the road, the same one where Karen and her fellow HOA board members lived, went completely dark. No air conditioning, no internet, not even streetlights. By noon, I could already hear the commotion. Cars slowly rolled up the dirt road toward my gate. One of them, of course, was Karen. She came storming up my driveway, hair in disarray and phone in hand, demanding answers. I calmly handed her a copy of the county's findings. Her face drained of color. It turned out the HOA had been illegally piggybacking off a power line easement that was never theirs to use. And they had been doing it for years. Just as she opened her mouth to protest, another car pulled up county code enforcement. Apparently, the tip I gave them earlier led to a full-blown investigation. They had questions for Karen and her board. And none of them were about me. But the twist: that quiet homeowner group I met with. Turns out they were already filing paperwork to dissolve the HOA. Karen didn't just lose power. She was about to lose control for good. Karen didn't say. much after the county officers began asking questions. She just stood there, holding her phone like it was going to save her. But the moment had passed. Neighbors began gathering near the gate, murmuring and snapping pictures. Some of them had no idea they'd been paying dues to an HOA that wasn't even legally using its own utilities. Once the story started spreading, support for dissolving the HOA grew fast. Folks who had once feared Karen's clipboard and fines were now voicing their frustrations out loud. A week later, a neighborhood vote officially disbanded the HOA. Karen resigned before the results were even announced. Turns out, some of her so-called rules weren't even enforceable. Her position had always depended more on fear than fact. Without that power, she faded into the background. Just another homeowner with a grudge and no one left to boss around. Meanwhile, I got back to digging my pond, this time with the blessing of the county. Turns out they even liked the idea, said it would help local wildlife and runoff drainage. And with the HOA gone, nobody came snooping around anymore. I built a small dock, planted some trees, and even added a few benches for when neighbors visit.